Hey, what's up, guys? You're watching Gamescript, and tonight we're looking at the Dallas Cowboys versus the Seattle Seahawks. They're playing in Dallas. It's a 47.5 point total with Dallas as 8.5 point favorites. So it's going to be a lopsided game according to this spread. And I think there's going to be a lot of popularity with certain builds, and I think that we can dig in and find a way to get different right after this. Hey, what's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heatseeker Sports, and you're watching Gamescript. This is a show where I'm going to break down the Dallas Cowboys versus Seattle Seahawks Thursday night football game from a DraftKings Showdown perspective. And we're looking at a total of 47.5 points, with Dallas as 8.5 point favorites, which means a lot of people are going to be building similar lineups. So we're going to have to try to find a few ways to get different, and we can dig into that in a second. Before I do that, though, hit that like button, looking for 15 in order to put out a shorter video a little bit later on today. And subscribe to the YouTube page. I'm almost at 200 subscribers, so get me over that. I want to get to 300 before the end of the season. So get me to 200 first. We're only a few away, so make sure to hit that subscribe. And plus, you want to subscribe anyways, because when I put out these shorter videos, they're usually a little bit closer to lock. So you're going to want to put on a alert so that you know when this video is posted. So let's dig into the slate. Looking at a player pool with a lot of familiar names, a lot of names that people like to click on. First up, we got the Ceedee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. Ceedee's had an awesome year. He's had a couple slow weeks in a row, and tonight he's got a tough matchup against Devin Witherspoon. Witherspoon is the best graded cornerback on PFF, so he's a tough matchup, and he should be shadowing Ceedee Lamb tonight. Witherspoon has moved all over the formation, so he's not locked in on a spot. So it's a good chance that he might be shadowing Ceedee Lamb tonight, and that should take Ceedee Lamb a little bit down in your projections, but not too far down, because Ceedee Lamb has the talent to beat a cornerback. But maybe we temper our expectations a little bit on Ceedee Lamb, but he does have the upside to put up 40 plus DraftKings points, as we can see from his game log. He did it on a couple occasions already against the Giants and against the Rams. So anything's possible here. If we notice a ownership dip on Ceedee Lamb because of this matchup, that is where we want to hammer him and put him in the captain and everything like that. But for now, I don't have ownership projections in front of me. And right now, I'm gonna kind of assume that he's going to be high owned, which is a good reason to put less of him in the captain. So keep Ceedee Lamb in every player pool for now. And when I put out my short video later on, I'm sure I'll have a better idea of what that ownership is going to be. Dak Prescott has been good this year, but he's a guy, he likes to bully on these weak teams. Carolina was a decent pass defense. He only had 16 points against them. Last decent pass defense that they faced, San Francisco, he only had 7 points against them. And then he had like a stretch there where they were blowing everybody out, and he was getting under 20 DraftKings points. So Dak Prescott is by no means a lock, even though he's had all these big weeks lately. 35 points against Washington, 42 points against the Giants, 31 points against Philly and the Rams, like so on. He's had a lot of big games, but two things that can kill Dak's potential to be on the optimal lineup are if the Seattle defense shows up. They have the cornerbacks, and they're generating the 11th most pressure since week 5. So they're able to generate pressure on top of having talented cornerbacks. So don't be surprised if Dak is slowed down tonight, and don't be surprised if this game hits the under too, because it's a 47.5 point total. If Seattle's able to slow down Dak, then this game should hit the under. But Seattle's been giving up a decent amount of points lately, but they do have some good games mixed in. Against the 49ers, they gave up 31 points, but the Rams only scored 17 points on them. Commanders, which have been scoring a decent amount of points, they scored 26 points. Ravens scored 37, but we go beyond that. The Browns scored 20. That was PJ Walker as the quarterback. The Cardinals scored 10 on them. The Bengals scored 17 on them in week 6. Giants scored 3 points on them, and so on. So they do have some games where they had few points scored on them, but a lot of those teams were shitty teams. So, there's some merit to thinking that Dak, could slow down tonight, but it's going to be a way to get different. So Dak on fire recently, but he does have the potential to disappoint. If we go to Tony Pollard had a couple good weeks in a row. Kind of wish that he didn't have that big week last week, because that would make him a perfect spot for tonight, because Seattle is not a good run defense. And if we get what I think is going to happen, or what I want to happen with Dak Prescott getting slowed down in the passing game, then that would make Tony Pollard the perfect candidate for the captain. Again, like Ceedee Lamb, it's going to depend on the ownership. I think the ownership is going to dictate whether you want to go with a passing game script for Dallas or a running game script for Dallas. So that's all going to depend on what that ownership dictates, because you want to compete against 20% of the field, not 80% of the field. And we want to take the less likely path to having a bunch of competition. So we'll keep an eye on that ownership and do a couple builds, pass and run captain. If we move on to DK Metcalf has had a disappointing year. 6 points last week, 20 points a week before that. He's only had a couple games over 20 DraftKings points. He's in a matchup that's difficult because Geno does not do well under pressure, and Dallas is a top 3 at generating pressure. And we faded Geno for that same reason against San Francisco a few days ago, and Geno predictably threw up a complete dud of a game. Hopefully there's still some people out there that think Geno's a good quarterback, because then we can take advantage there as well by fading him completely. I don't have any real reason to plug Geno in any lineups other than to get different if his ownership is low. And if we see too many people going 4-2, 5-1 Dallas builds, then that's a perfect opportunity where we want to use the Seattle side and go heavier on the Seattle side. But for right now, I don't like Geno, and DK Metcalf has been disappointing this year. I don't like that passing game at all. So it's tough to get on any of these guys. And DK Metcalf is not a guy that I want to pay up for tonight unless I'm trying to build a Seattle lineup. Geno Smith, just talked about him. Completely a bust. 8 points last week. He's had so many weeks with under 20 DraftKings points. He's only had 2 weeks where he crossed 20 DraftKings points, and he's in a tough matchup tonight. Let's see what Dallas is allowing 18 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. Seattle is allowing 15.5 points a game to the DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. These are all from week 5 on. I lop out the first 4 weeks of the season because you have rookies adjusting to the game. You have guys taking like lack of rust. You got the whole rust situation. Guys not playing a bunch of reps in preseason anymore. There's all sorts of reasons why those first few games, I just take them out completely. They're almost like an extension of the preseason at this point. So it's a good idea to take those types of games out. Perfect example is with Denver. Denver in week 4 gave up 70 points to Miami, and they looked like they were going to be a complete bust. They changed their entire season around, and you got to take out those first few weeks of the season just because they're not an accurate reflection on where teams are now. So if we're looking at the matchups in general, Tony Pollard has the best matchup on the slate, with Seattle giving up 28 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. On the other side, Charbonnet does not have a bad situation either, with Dallas giving up almost 20 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. We have the worst matchup is the wideouts on Dallas's side, because Seattle's only giving up 8 DraftKings points a game to the wideouts. More susceptible to the slot. That's where Ceedee Lamb has the best DVOA matchup on the slate as far as receivers, because Seattle is giving up 19.5 DraftKings points a game to slot receivers, and Ceedee Lamb has the best DVOA matchup. But that, I don't think, is considering the fact that Witherspoon is going to be potentially shadowing him. And so that'll affect his DVOA a ton. If we move on to, let's see, the tight ends. The tight ends, Seattle has a better of the two matchups, but they have a tight end by committee going on. Dallas is giving up 13 DraftKings points again to the tight end position, and Seattle is giving up 12 DraftKings points again to a game to the tight end position. Dak tends to use Jake Ferguson if he needs a safety valve. That's when he uses the tight ends. We had Head Chopper on the show the other day. He's a Dallas fan. He follows the team closely. He examines that type of stuff. So if we think that Dak is going to be under pressure tonight, which he should be with Seattle, and if they're covering Ceedee Lamb well, then Ferguson is a guy that we're going to want to look at for our lineups tonight. We also have, let's see, the wideouts for Seattle. Dallas is giving up 11 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. Dallas is giving up 15.5 DraftKings points a game to the slot, and they're giving up, I already said quarterback, 17.9 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback. So Geno Smith is most likely a pass tonight, unless we see his ownership is super high, he's an easy fade. If we want to try to get different by building those Seattle lineups, then maybe we want to incorporate him a little bit more. Maybe we have a fluky week where he's able to get it together and get one of those 20 point DraftKings nights. It is prime time. It's coming off of it's not a typical Thursday night game, because these teams played last Thursday, so they both have the normal amount of time between games. So we'll see what happens. Seattle is playing for their playoff lives, though, so that makes them that much more intriguing if you want to go to the Seattle side. The Brandon Cooks, he went off last week. He was one of my top guys that I was recommending last week, and he ended up in the optimal lineup and got him for a decent ownership in there, along with Curtis Samuel, two cheap guys that had good nights. Faded Ceedee Lamb in that slate, and it ended up working out. Same situation that could happen tonight with Ceedee Lamb, in that he could get slowed down a little bit. But I do like Ceedee Lamb tonight. I don't think that this is the same situation as Thursday. I like Ceedee Lamb. The guy that I probably want to leave out of my lineups this week is going to be Dak, as far as expensive guys, because I want to put Ceedee Lamb in there and I want to put Pollard in there. But we'll play around when it comes time to building those lineups. Kenneth Walker is doubtful, which makes Charbonnet interesting. But Charbonnet is expensive. If we look at his flex price, he is $6,800 because he is the only basically running back on Seattle. And he got 4 targets last week in a blowout. He got 14 attempts, so he got a ton of touches. He only had 10 DraftKings points, though. But he was up against San Francisco, which is a much tougher run defense. So Charbonnet is in a better matchup tonight, and he is on the player pool. Ferguson, I mentioned, let's look at his logs. 4.5 DraftKings points last week, 6.2 the week before that. He's in kind of a tight end committee as well with Shoemaker, but he's had a stretch, and he's I think the second leading receiver on Dallas right now. So Ferguson is a good he's a good guy to have in our player pool. So we don't want to we want to have a decent amount of exposure to Ferguson tonight. Go past all these scrubby quarterbacks. Cowboys D is in play yet again. Geno has not been good this year, and if he's forced to throw the ball more than he's comfortable with, then we could be looking at a decent game by the Dallas defense tonight. Lots of sacks. Geno doesn't do well under pressure. Let's take a look at some of Geno's game logs, or the opposing defense game logs against Seattle. Last week, the 49ers D had 14 DraftKings points against them, which would have gotten you in the optimal. Let's see. A couple weeks ago against the Ravens, another good defense, they scored 15 DraftKings points against Geno. Browns D only scored 5. And if we scroll up a little bit more, that's about it for defenses. But recently, Geno has been getting killed by some of these good defenses. So that puts the Cowboys in play. This could be a game where we only need them to put up like 12, 13 points to get in the optimal. So Dallas is in play. Smith-Njigba is a guy I like tonight. Smith-Njigba has the best matchup on the side of the Seahawks, and I like him, probably my favorite guy on Seattle. We've seen him make a couple big plays recently. That's not going to go unnoticed by the coaches, and especially with DK Metcalf not doing well, and Lockett's been kind of gimpy lately. That makes Smith-Njigba all the more interesting. And he had 3 targets last week, 6 targets the week before that. But he went on that little stretch: 6 targets, 5 targets, 7 targets. Again, so I think that tonight we can expect Njigba to get about 7 targets. And I think that with the attention on Lockett and DK Metcalf, I think that we could see Njigba get not only into the optimal, but get a decent score. I don't know if I want him as a captain. I don't think we need him as a captain because we don't need that salary relief tonight, I don't think. But Smith-Njigba is definitely a guy that I want to have a heavy exposure to. And he does well against his coverage too. He's got according to Rich Rebar, he has a 22.4% target share against the coverage that Dallas uses. And his target rate per route run is 23.8. So this is looking like a good Smith-Njigba week in general. And he has the best matchup. He does best against the coverage. And Seattle's going to need to throw tonight. So I like Smith-Njigba a good amount tonight. Aubrey and Myers, the kickers, are both in play. Aubrey, 9 points the last couple weeks. He's had a few double-digit weeks in there. Led off the beginning of the season with a stretch of double-digit points. And if we see the same type of outcome for Seattle, who's not a very good team, as we saw for Giants, Jets, Cardinals, and New England, then we could be looking at double-digit points for the kicker of Dallas. I will say that I think the coaching is better than these other teams, but Dallas is they've been a better playing offense lately. They beat up on these weaker teams. The wild card that we have is the cornerback situation on Seattle's side, as well as the pressure that they're able to generate. If that comes into play tonight and they're able to slow Dallas down, could stall them in the red zone. And that means that Brandon Aubrey would be getting plenty of opportunities, because I don't think Dallas is going to have trouble moving the ball in general with their weapons. So Aubrey is definitely in play tonight. Myers has been a stud for a lot of the season. He had 15 DraftKings points, 21 DraftKings points. He's had a bunch of 9 DraftKings points. He's had an 18 DraftKings points. So maybe not a ton of huge games, but he's had big games. And when you see a kicker scoring that 15 plus multiple times in the season, then I definitely want him in my player pool, because I don't think that Geno is talented enough to put up a bunch of points on Dallas, and they have conservative play calling. Don't be surprised to see them trying to kick field goals when they have opportunities to. Rico Dowdle. I like Tony Pollard a lot tonight. Dowdle, I don't hate using him if you need salary relief, but he's 4,200, which is pretty expensive. Seattle is, like I said, giving up the most or a decent amount of running back points per game, DraftKings running back points per game. So keep them in your player pool and use them as, Gamescript dictates. Michael Gallup has taken a backseat to Brandon Cooks and even a backseat to Jalen Tolbert a little bit. Last week, he only had 1 target. He had that one game a few weeks ago. Dak was making a huge effort to get him targets. He gave him 10 targets, and Gallup had 5 DraftKings points. And after that, it was just like, okay, I'm not going to throw to you anymore. 3 targets, 2 targets, 5 targets, 1 target. And the best game that he had was 15 DraftKings points against the Giants. I would think that the only thing that Michael Gallup has going for him is if they keep Witherspoon on Ceedee Lamb and then Woolen is on Cooks, that would free up both Michael Gallup and Tolbert to have opportunity tonight. So Tolbert is more interesting to me at 3K. He got 3 targets last week, 5 targets, 5 targets, 5 targets. So he's the guy that's been getting more targets recently. When I had Head Chopper on the show, Head Chopper had Tolbert as one of his guys that he wanted to keep in the player pool as a guy that he thought could be sneaky. And he ended up getting only 3 targets, but they had a blowout win against Washington, so they didn't really need him. Last week, he had a couple opportunities, though. I think there was a couple deep balls. He had a 31-yard catch last week, so that gives you an idea of the type of receptions that he's getting. So Jalen Tolbert is the guy I want in my player pool tonight, and I like him more than I like Gallup, unless he's more owned. So Seattle Seahawks defense, I don't hate them as a play tonight, just with the pressure they're able to generate and the cornerbacks that they have. So I'm not going to take them out of my player pool. I don't think that this is going to be a blowout game. That's my gut telling me that. I think it's going to be probably a closer game. I think Dak Prescott's going to be held in check, but I think that Ceedee Lamb is still going to be able to rack up those PPR points. I think Pollard will have a bigger role in this game, which I think will slow down the pace. And I think that Seattle is going to have an opportunity to slow these Cowboys down a little bit, and I don't mind their defense. So Noah Fant, not interested in Fant. I'm not interested in Schoonmaker, and I'm not interested in Disley. I just don't like rolling the dice on those, three-headed beasts when it comes to tight end by committee. Turpin is a guy that I'm interested in as well. Turpin's another one of these receivers like Tolbert. He gets his opportunities every once in a while. And like last week, he scored 10 DraftKings points. He's had a few games, though, with multiple targets. Turpin, he's a guy that you want to keep in for salary relief, but I'm not going to have a ton of exposure to him, but I'm not taking him out of my player pool. Bobo, not really interested in Bobo. I know that he's had a couple big games, but I think that Smith-Njigba has been the guy that's rising lately. And Bobo hasn't had more than 2 receptions since week 7 against Arizona. So I'm probably fading him tonight. And I don't really see too much worth dumpster diving except for Deuce Vaughn. If I needed a $200 guy, I'd go with Deuce Vaughn. And then make sure you're checking to see if he's inactive tonight. He was inactive last week. But Deuce Vaughn is a guy that I think this is kind of a good matchup for. But he hasn't gotten a ton of opportunity. But if I need a $200 guy, then he's a guy that I would probably like lean towards, because I don't really like any of these other $200 guys. They have Martavis Bryant now, but I don't. Yeah, he was inactive last week. He's probably just on the practice squad. But if he gets activated, I'm still probably not interested in Martavis Bryant. We haven't seen him in years. And I don't really see anyone else beyond that. So let's start building a lineup. We'll go with the chalky build first. I'll give you who the optimizer is building. They like Pollard in the captain, who I like a lot. I'm hoping that his ownership isn't overly high. I hope people go towards the passing game more. But Pollard is who I like the most in captain at this point. Then they have the trifecta in there. They got Lamb and Prescott. And on the Seattle side, they go with Charbonnet. I personally like Smith-Njigba over Charbonnet tonight. And they also have Aubrey. And then you can use your imagination for the last guy. We plug Aubrey in there. That leaves you with 2,700. Turpin, Shoemaker. In this case, Bobo is interesting. So you got those options there. If you wanted to go, let's take out Charbonnet and put in Smith-Njigba. That leaves you with 4,300. And that point, you got Dowdle, you got Gallup, you got Tolbert. Way better options. I like going with Smith-Njigba over Charbonnet in that type of build. Although I don't really like this build in general, but I've been burned by not liking these optimal builds recently. So, take that for what it's worth. Now, if I was building a Dallas heavy lineup, I would probably go Pollard because I like Pollard. I would go with Lamb. Those are my 2 favorite expensive guys. I would get Smith-Njigba in there. Let's see. Probably Cowboys. Cowboys D. I kind of like tonight. That leaves me with 6,500 per guy left. If I want to fade Prescott in a matchup, in a build like this, I might go with. I'd go Metcalf over Lockett. And that leaves with 3,500. That leaves you with options for like Seattle, Fant, Tolbert, Turpin, guys like that. If you wanted to swap it out and put Ceedee Lamb instead, I think that works too. And it gets you different not having Dak in there. That brings you down to 2,700. That gives you in that Turpin range. At that point, I'd probably take out the Cowboys D. And I might put in the kicker instead. Let's put in Aubrey. That leaves us with 3,500. That leaves us with the option to put in Tolbert at least and Turpin. Seahawks D is an option there too, and Noah Fant, guys like that. So I kind of like that direction of the build. Leaves us with like those 2 Seattle guys. If you wanted to, I don't like Lockett at all tonight, so I'm not going to be having exposure to Lockett. But if you wanted to put in Geno instead of Metcalf, I think that's the only other really like high-priced option. Let's say you wanted to put Dak in there after all, because like the salary's there and there's not a whole bunch of options. That leaves you with 3,500 per guy. If we wanted to go with the kicker, let's say Aubrey, 2,100. So it gets tough if you have Dak in there. If you're trying to jam in all those studs, if you change this to Pollard, I know this is getting closer to that optimal. Pollard and Lamb, get those guys in there. I mean, it's basically what the optimal was pretty much saying. You got Turpin, Schoonmaker, guys like that as options. If you go take out Aubrey and we want to put in Tolbert, let's say, that leaves us with 4,700. So Myers, Dowdle, Gallup, Seattle defense, guys like that. So it's a little bit tricky to build tonight. I think I would go if I'm going like with Tolbert. I mean, if I'm going with Pollard or if I'm going with Lamb as captain, I'm probably doing 5-1 builds because it means that I think that like Seattle is just going to get crushed. If I'm going 5-1, the one I want is Smith-Njigba, which is, I think, getting you a little bit different too, because I think a lot of people would lean on one of those guys like, what's his face, Metcalf or Lockett. But I like Smith-Njigba the best out of all those guys. So that kind of leads me in that direction. Honestly, I think I would rather have get rid of Prescott like I was doing before. Maybe put Metcalf in there, like he's the next guy up with as far as like upside. If you want to leave a ton of salary on the table, that's an option too. We can go with, in this build, like I said, like Aubrey, let's say. And I just like the spot that leaves me in the best, I think, as far as options, because I can put in Tolbert and guys like that. No, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have two receivers in there without Dak, but Dak could easily like throw one bomb to Tolbert, score a touchdown. That's the only touchdown he gets on the night. Then he's getting a lot of PPR points to Ceedee Lamb, but Ceedee Lamb's not getting touchdowns, which keeps him out of the captain spot. Tony Pollard is in there. He's getting PPR points too, in addition to rushing points and then touchdown points, because they're getting into the red zone and Pollard is converting. And then when Pollard is not converting, Aubrey is converting. On the other side, you got Geno in catch-up mode. He's throwing to Metcalf. He's throwing to Njigba. And he's, going to leave us with that extra spot. Gallup, Tolbert, both interesting. Like I said, one of those guys could catch a bomb, and that could still keep Dak Prescott out of this optimal lineup. So there's a direction there. Now, if you want to get different and build a, let's say, Seattle shows up type of build, maybe we put Smith-Njigba in that captain spot. I don't know that he has the upside yet. We haven't seen it out of him, but maybe this is the night. He's a first-round draft pick. They drafted him, pretty early, and they have not given him the opportunities, but we've seen him make plays. Like last week, he made a crazy one-handed like flip grab, and the week before that, he made a big contested grab. So they're getting trust in him. And in Njigba, a lot of hype going on him leading into the season. One of the top wide receiver prospects in the draft. He's not just some scrub. So Smith-Njigba, let's say this is his breakout game against Dallas with the best cornerbacks on those other players. So let's put him in there. Let's say that we got Metcalf chipping in. Well, let's get in Lamb. Let's say that Prescott's getting shut down, because I think that's why Njigba can beat Lamb, because Lamb's getting those PPR points, but he's not getting the touchdowns. That keeps Prescott out. Let's get Pollard in there. Let's get Metcalf in there, and let's get Geno in there, because Geno's throwing to two guys. Leaves us with 2,200. So I don't really love that. So let's say we swap out Metcalf with Lockett, even though Metcalf is the better play. But let's say for whatever reason Lockett is doing well tonight. That leaves us with 4,600. That leaves us with Myers, who would also work in this build. Dowdle, guys like that. Let's say it's not Lockett. Let's put in Myers. That leaves us with 7,400. Charbonnet. That leaves you in a perfect spot for Charbonnet, which would work in this build too. So there's a few different ways that you can go in this build. This is more of a lower scoring game because I got Metcalf and I got Lockett out of there. I got Smith-Njigba as the captain and Charbonnet. So the rookies are the guys that are racking up the points. They're not necessarily like converting on all those. So Myers is getting those field goals. Geno is locked in on Smith-Njigba, and that's why Smith-Njigba is able to be that captain. Metcalf and Lockett aren't getting the work. Geno's able to get in there anyways because maybe he passes a touchdown to Charbonnet, and that's a way to get different, and that's a way to get a Seattle build in there. I would envision Seattle being relevant in a low-scoring game. It's got to be a low-scoring game. I don't think they're going to win it in a high-scoring game. I don't think you're going to get a 4-2 Seattle build in a high-scoring game. It'd have to be a low-scoring game. You have to envision it under the under, and you have to kind of envision Dak getting shut down, which he has several times, and you have to envision, Ceedee Lamb not scoring. So it's a lot of ifs, but this is a way to build a Seattle lineup that I like. If you like Metcalf more, let's plug him in a captain. Let's see. If we do that, maybe we get rid of it's a tough way to go. Let's get rid of Geno, I guess. Let's put Charbonnet in there instead. That leaves us with 3,200. So that leaves us in Tolbert range, Turpin, guys like that. So, it's an option if you like Metcalf more. I would imagine, like my favorite, well, actually, no, take that back. Got to put Smith-Njigba back in there. So let's get Smith-Njigba back in there. 4,800, and that leaves us with, that puts us in Aubrey territory, Dowdle, guys like that. But if you want to get Seattle build, I would probably put Charbonnet and Smith-Njigba in it. So if we have Metcalf as captain and we want to put Charbonnet and Smith-Njigba in there, that's going to leave us with 2,400. Schoonmaker, at that point, you're just rolling the dice on guys. But, these are the guys that I think would be in play if you were doing a Metcalf build. Maybe they shut down Lamb a little bit better than that. And instead of that, we go with, let's say we go back to Geno. Leaves us with 4,600. That way we can put in Myers in that build. That's a 5-1. I don't like going 5-1 Seattle because if they end up winning tonight, it's going to be like more of a competitive game. Dallas is still going to be able to put up points, but Metcalf, doesn't really work for me in the captain. I could be spacing. I could be in like some sort of a take lock. So if you guys see something better, leave it in the comment section. If you like Metcalf as a captain, if you like a build that's better than that, leave it in the comment section and make sure to hit that like, get it to 15 likes. Looking to get that shorter video out later when I have more information as far as like ownership and stuff like that. But these are a couple directions that I like. I kind of like that Smith-Njigba captain now that I build a couple with it. Maybe that'll be more in play than I thought. But I do think that Dallas wins this game tonight. I think it's going to go under. And I think maybe Dak Prescott gets kept in check. If I'm fading an expensive guy or going to have lower exposure to an expensive guy, it's going to be Dak. And it's going to be Metcalf. Like those guys are too expensive. Lockett, I don't like either. I like the cheap guys on Seattle. I like Charbonnet and I like Smith-Njigba, which is perfect because those are, better for salary relief, which is what we're going to need tonight. And I like some of those cheaper wide receivers on Dallas in Gallup and Tolbert, preferably Tolbert, just the way that he's been getting more work lately. But rotate Gallup in if you do a Tolbert lineup for sure. And that's it for this week, guys. And good luck. And I'll see you later tonight.